MMORPGs today seem to be a dying genre of game. Popular ones today seem to have been made nearly 20 years ago in the early 2000s, and seem to still be getting updated almost weekly or even monthly. And if you're like me and you haven't been living under a rock, you'll know that Necromancy is due to release on August 7th in the world that we call RuneScape. However, if you do live under a rock...
You fucking what, mate?
No, not you. You.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, let me give you the details. Necromancy is set to release in less than a month's time. It'll be the 6th new skill added to RuneScape, and the first brand new combat skill added to the game ever in its life. So, what does this mean for you? Well, if you're like me, a pretty average RuneScape player, probably not that much. In my head, we're getting a new skill that's gonna take me probably a year to get to level 120, since I can't really play RuneScape that often. However, if you're not like me, it probably means one of three things. Either,
I wonder if people are going to try and steal my bones.
what is with people interrupting my video? Anyways, you're either one of three people. I want to be first to reach max level, or I wonder how much damage I'll be able to do now, or if you're like me, I guess that just means I'll have to get another skill to 120. With all of that said, this means that there will be a wide range of people trying to do completely different things when Necromancy does release. But just for fun, let's go ahead and do a general overview for people who might not know some of the details of Necromancy. But first, I just wanted to real quick thank all of you. You guys took my first video and absolutely blew it out of the water. So if you would like to, feel free to subscribe. But anyways, starting off, Necromancy overall is going to be a new combat skill. And with the new combat skill, a new max player level will be added as well. This being level 152. Obviously, with Necromancy being a new combat skill, you'll be able to use it to fight any kind of monster you possibly want. However, we're gonna skip that and get back to it in a moment. The first thing I figured we'd go over are a thing called talents. Essentially, talents are like a skill tree that you might have used in other video games, such as Borderlands or even New World. In those games, what you would do is either level up your character or weapons, and as doing such, you would unlock more buffs to make the game easier. On top of that, they would also give you the ability to do more damage over time to your enemies. This became essential in later game content. But getting back to Necromancy, this system, like I said, will be similar to those skill trees. These talents will essentially be buffs to all of your abilities that also happen to enhance your damage and your skills. Now, you're probably thinking, that's cool and all, but do I just train like I would magic or ranged? And the answer would be no, but also yes. Let me explain. While you can train Necromancy just like you would any other combat skill, players are also offered a brand new way to train the skill in a completely different format. This will be called rituals. Rituals are a completely new way to look at training Necromancy, where instead of killing monsters and gaining experience, you would use items on something similar to an altar and conjure spirits over time. While early game footage of this method does seem to look pretty AFK, it does also seem that people who had an early look at Necromancy found you could do actions during your ritual to gain more experience. This means that people can just let rituals do its own thing, or have the option to interact with the actual ritual itself and gain a faster experience rate. With all of that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the main reason Necromancy is so interesting. This being the fact that it is indeed a combat skill. And since it is a combat skill, this of course means that it will be used in combat. So, how exactly does it work? Well, as it seems right now, more than likely we're going to have 14 abilities and 8 spells at our disposal for the style of Necromancy, just like you would with magic, melee, or ranged. On top of all this, you'll be able to conjure up some little friends to help you in your fights. These minions currently include zombies, ghosts, and skeletons. With this in mind, It also does seem that you'll be able to use summoning familiars at the same time as having these minions out. So with all of this basic information, what does Necromancy truly mean for RuneScape going forward after this update? Well, if we take a step back, RuneScape for the last 20 plus years has only had the ability for you to use magic, melee, and ranged for you to kill your opponents. Then, back in 2012, with the introduction of Evolution of Combat, these combat styles became even more varied by adding more abilities to the game and making combat more intense. Since this has been the case, the introduction of Necromancy will be a huge turning point to take all of these styles, abilities, monsters, and bosses to the next level. I wouldn't be surprised to see more mechanics on bosses that require you to use Necromancy specifically in the future. And on top of all of that, I wouldn't even be close to surprised if certain bosses became much more accessible to newer and low-level players. And on top of all of that, I definitely see buffs and debuffs being used in addition of this new skill to make boss times drop even further. And because some people think that I don't know how to play RuneScape 3 properly, I've brought in an expert. I did an interview with one of your guys' favorite guide makers for RuneScape 3 today, RS. And lucky for me, he happens to have way too much time on his hands and plays RuneScape absolutely way too much. And on top of this, he's the worst of the best. So let's go ahead and get into this interview.
Ladies, gentlemen, am I often forgotten, but certainly not by me. Terrorsaur Mall Enchantments, welcome to the channel and welcome to another video.
And guys, this is RS. There's not really much more of an introduction needed. He is the person that I have brought in to do like a couple questions with. And the first one that really I wanted to ask was, do you think PVM is going to really change that much with Necromancy coming out in the next few weeks?
I think it'll change just because it's another combat style. Like, we have our combat triangle, so adding something into that's definitely going to change it. You know, for better or for worse, not sure yet, but change will definitely happen. For sure.
How, with the introduction of a new, like, it's not a triangle anymore. It's basically a square. I mean, what a square.
Good combat squares.
Right, love a combat square. Do you think it's going to change in a way that's going to be more positive or negative for the player in RuneScape?
It depends on how it's balanced. I mean, if it stays broken like most content has been released for, either completely underwhelming or overwhelming, then, you know, that's on Jagex. On paper, I could see it being very good, because the whole idea was that, yeah, it's a combat style that here in-game for people to get into PVM with, and that was the whole premise of it. But seeing the stuff so far, I have no idea if that's going to be executable with it.
Right. Now, as for your credibility, right, you have held a couple of records when it comes to PVM, and as we said earlier, you're like the worst of the best. Do you think that the high-end tier of PVM is going to be affected by the addition of Necromancy? And do you think it'll be good or bad, or?
It just depends on how broken it is on release and how, you know, what DPM levels are like. How does it integrate into other combat styles? Are you able to just use stuff with other styles? You know, what spaghetti code's just going to be sitting there for too long? If the DPM is insane, like when they were playtesting it and there was a poison meta that was doing 800k DPM, if stuff like that is in game and it just stays there, then yeah, it'll wipe the floor with the other combat styles, because, you know, it's a numbers thing at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, more about the people that are like just starting RuneScape, or maybe in the middle of the game, you know, they've got a few 99s, maybe they're not fully maxed out, they're not even close to working on comp. Do you think that this is going to make the game easier for them, or do you think it's going to make it more complicated and more challenging for them coming into Necromancy?
It gives them an option to where if they, I think what newer players will do is they will either focus on necromancy and they're like, I am a necromancer until I am maxed, and that's all they do. I mean, we see people like that are like melee camps, range camps, mage camps. We see people play like that all the time.
I know I'm a mage camp.
Yeah. So it's like, if people just choose to do necromancy and only necromancy and it integrates well into current bosses, I could see them doing that. However, the learning curve is going to be very high, just like anything else in Scape. RuneScape has probably one of the most ridiculous learning / skill curves I've seen in any game ever. And it just depends on how well it's executed and what we get on release, honestly. It can either be the most user-friendly thing to ever exist ever, and every newer player is going to get into it and be like, yes, necromancy, I can just use this to mop up any boss I want, and I have my Reaper crew, and it's all fun and games, and it's fantastic, we love life. Or it's going to be the most confusing pile of discharge to ever exist in the game, and no one will touch it. I think it'll probably be one of those extremes.
For sure. Now, last thing. Can you please let some specific people know that I actually play RuneScape 3? Okay. I
Oh my god, yes, you do play RuneScape 3.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. My goal for this channel is to go forward and make a new video every 2 or maybe even 3 weeks. And with the absolutely outstanding support on my last video, I think that's going to be pretty easy for me to accomplish. But other than that, guys, I hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good one.